The explosions lit up the vast darkness of space like tiny stars being born and dying in quick succession. Commander Ta-1 stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Stellar Dawn, watching as another battle between the Minor Concordia and the Von Hegemony drew to its predictable conclusion. His weathered face showed no emotion, though his heart ached for the countless lives lost in yet another pointless engagement. The war had raged for 50 years, consuming resources, lives, and hope across thousands of star systems. The Concordiat and Hegemony had started as trading partners, but a dispute over newly discovered resource-rich worlds had sparked the conflict that now consumed the known galaxy. Taiwan remembered the early days, when everyone thought the war would last months, perhaps a year at most. Now, half a century later, the death toll had risen into the billions. Entire planets lay in ruins, their surfaces scarred by orbital bombardments, and their populations scattered to refugee colonies. Status report. Ta-1 called out to his bridge crew, his voice carrying the weight of countless similar battles. "Sir, Hegemony forces are pulling back to their defensive line," replied his tactical officer. "Our losses match theirs almost exactly. Again." Ta-1 nodded slowly. It was always the same. Both sides had developed nearly identical technologies, tactics, and strategies over the decades of conflict. Each battle ended in a stalemate, with both forces withdrawing to lick their wounds and prepare for the next meaningless engagement. The commander walked to the large viewing window, his reflection ghostly against the backdrop of space. The Stellar Dawn was the pride of the Concordiat fleet, yet even this mighty vessel could not break the deadlock. Behind him, his crew worked at their stations, their movements mechanical, lacking the energy and purpose they had shown in years past. "Another day, another draw," muttered his second-in-command, standing beside him. "The High Council won't be pleased." "The High Council hasn't been pleased in 40 years, Ta-1 replied. "They keep expecting different results from the same actions. That's the definition of madness, according to some philosopher I once read." As they prepared to return to Concordiat space, a young officer rushed onto the bridge, her eyes wide with excitement. "Commander, urgent message from the Deep Space Exploration Division." Ta-1 turned, raising an eyebrow. The Exploration Division had been reduced to a skeleton crew years ago, with most resources diverted to the war effort. They rarely had anything to report besides routine surveys of uninhabited systems. "Report," he ordered, trying to keep his voice neutral despite the officer's obvious excitement. "Sir, the DSED vessel Curious Mind has detected an unusual signal from the unexplored regions of the Orion Arm. It's like nothing we've ever seen before." The bridge crew perked up at this news, the first break in routine they'd had in months. Ta-1 strode to the communication station, looking at the data streaming across the screen. The signal was indeed unique. Complex patterns that suggested advanced technology, but completely different from both Concordiat and Hegemony protocols. "Location?" he asked, studying the wavelength patterns. "A star system we'd previously marked as uninhabited," the officer replied. "But sir, the signal isn't coming from space. It's coming from the third planet of the system." Hours later, Ta-1 stood in a secure briefing room with the highest-ranking Concordiat officials who could be reached. The holographic displays showed images that had stunned them all into silence. A blue-green planet teeming with life, covered in vast cities that sparkled like jewels in the darkness. "How did we miss this?" demanded one of the admirals. "We've surveyed that sector dozens of times." The truth was both simple and shocking. The planet, which its inhabitants called Earth, had developed in isolation, hidden by natural phenomena that had masked their technological signatures. While the Concordiat and Hegemony had fought their endless war, this species called humans had evolved, developed, and reached for the stars in their own unique way. "Their technology level?" another official asked. "Advanced," Ta-1 replied, "but different from ours. They've developed along completely different lines. Their approach to science, to warfare, to everything. It's unlike anything we've seen." The implications were staggering. Here was a civilization that had developed without any influence from either the Concordiate or hegemony. Their methods and technologies were completely unknown, potentially offering new solutions to break the deadlock that had gripped the galaxy for so long. As Taiwan left the briefing room hours later, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. The humans had somehow managed to remain neutral in a great conflict, building their civilization while the rest of the galaxy tore itself apart. Their fresh perspective might be exactly what was needed to end this war. Looking out at the stars from a viewport, Taiwan allowed himself a small smile. For the first time in 50 years, the future held uncertainty, and uncertainty meant possibility. The war had dragged on for so long because both sides could predict each other's every move. But now, an unknown factor had entered the equation. The commander returned to his ship, issuing orders for a diplomatic mission to be prepared. As the stellar dawn moved through space, Taiwan thought about the images he'd seen of Earth, of its cities and people. He wondered what these humans would make of the conflict that had consumed the galaxy, and whether they would choose to remain neutral or take a side. Either way, the discovery of Earth had changed everything. The long war had entered a new phase, and for the first time in half a century, no one could predict what would happen next. Ambassador Jaya stood before the entrance of the United Earth Government headquarters in Seoul, her heart racing despite years of diplomatic training. The building, a towering structure of glass and steel, reflected the morning sun in ways that reminded her of home, yet was distinctly alien in its design. Her assistant adjusted the atmospheric converter at her throat, ensuring she could breathe Earth's air comfortably. The gravity here was slightly stronger than what she was used to, making each step feel heavy and deliberate. But it wasn't the physical differences that worried her. It was the weight of her mission. The security scan was unlike anything she had encountered before. The humans used technology that seemed to peer through her very molecules, yet did so without any detectable energy emissions. It was her first hint that the initial survey reports hadn't exaggerated. Human technology was far more advanced than expected. Inside the conference room, Jaya faced the assembled Earth leadership. Admiral Henul, a stern-faced man with graying hair, sat at the center of the long table. Beside him, General Sunmei studied the Concordiate diplomat with keen interest. The rest of the room was filled with military commanders, scientists, and government officials. "We appreciate the Concordiate's interest in Earth," Admiral Henul began, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to making life-or-death decisions. "But you must understand our position. We've developed in isolation, kept our peace, built our civilization without outside interference. Why should we involve ourselves in a war that isn't ours?" Jaya took a deep breath before responding. "Because the war will eventually find you, whether you choose to be involved or not. The hegemony doesn't believe in neutral parties." General Sunmei leaned forward. "Tell us about your military capabilities. We need to understand what we'd be facing if we chose to help, or if we chose to stay neutral and had to defend ourselves." Jaya activated her holographic display, showing the latest battle she had witnessed before leaving for Earth. The humans watched with surprising calm as massive ships exchanged fire in the void of space. "This is our most advanced technology," Jaya explained. "The battle you're watching involved over 300 capital ships on each side." Unexpectedly, several of the human officials exchanged amused glances. Admiral Henul cleared his throat. "Ambassador, would you like to see one of our training exercises?" What Jaya witnessed next shook her to her core. The humans demonstrated combat capabilities that made the Concordiate's best ships look primitive. Their vessels moved with impossible precision, using maneuvers that seemed to bend the laws of physics. Their weapons were devastatingly efficient, and their defensive systems were unlike anything she had ever seen. "How?" she asked, struggling to maintain her diplomatic composure. "How did you develop such advanced technology in isolation?" General Sunmei's answer was simple but chilling. "We had to. Humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We've had to innovate or die. Every major breakthrough in human history came from either conflict or the desire to prevent conflict. The meeting continued for hours as Jia learned more about human military history. Their species had developed warfare to an art form, not through choice, but through necessity. While the Concordiate and Hegemony had fought their 50-year war, humans had been perfecting combat techniques for millennia. During a break in the discussions, Jia overheard Admiral Hainul and General Sunmai in heated debate. "We should stay out of it," Hainul insisted. "Let them fight their war. We've only just achieved unity on Earth. Why risk everything we've built?" Sunmai's response was measured but firm. "Because if we don't help the Concordiate now, we'll face the hegemony alone later. This is our chance to establish ourselves as a major power in the galaxy, to ensure humanity's security for generations to come." As the day drew to a close, Jia made her final appeal. She didn't speak of duty or obligation. Instead, she spoke of opportunity. The chance for humanity to step onto the galactic stage on their own terms, to shape the future of not just their species, but all species. The debate in the council chamber grew intense. Some argued for isolation, others for limited support, and still others for full military involvement. Jia watched as humans demonstrated another trait that had helped them survive: the ability to argue passionately while still working toward a common goal. Finally, General Sunbai stood to address the council. "We've spent centuries preparing for first contact, building our defenses, advancing our technology. We didn't do all this to hide when the galaxy finally found us. We did it to be ready. I say we're ready." The vote that followed was close, but in the end, Earth agreed to send military advisors to assess the situation firsthand. It wasn't the full commitment Jia had hoped for, but as she prepared to return to her ship, she realized it was something far more valuable. It was the beginning of humanity's emergence as a galactic power. Looking back at the Earth through her ship's viewport, Jia couldn't help but feel a mixture of hope and fear. The humans would change everything. She just wasn't sure if the galaxy was ready for what that meant. Lieutenant Yu Jin watched the holographic display with growing disbelief as the Concordiate fleet arranged itself in what they called an advanced combat formation. To her trained eye, it looked like something from an ancient naval battle, with ships lined up as if they were still floating on water rather than moving through the infinite possibilities of space. She stood aboard the Concordiate flagship alongside other human observers, each taking notes and trying to hide their dismay. The fleet before them represented what the Concordiate considered their most elite fighting force, yet they moved with all the grace of a playground game of follow the leader. "Watch this," one of the Concordiate commanders said proudly. "This is our most successful tactical maneuver." The fleet began a coordinated turn, maintaining their rigid formation as they faced the simulated enemy. Yu Jin bit her lip to keep from speaking out. The entire maneuver had left the fleet's underside exposed for nearly 40 seconds, enough time for even a basic Earth defense force to destroy half their ships. Later that day, she sat in her temporary quarters, recording her report for Colonel Da-hyun back on Earth. "Sir, it's worse than we imagined. They're fighting a three-dimensional war with two-dimensional thinking. Their ships have incredible capabilities, but they're using them like ancient sailing vessels." She sent detailed analysis of what she'd observed, including the countless missed opportunities for tactical advantage she'd spotted in just one day of observation. The Concordiate ships could move in any direction, yet they insisted on maintaining level flight paths, as if they were bound by an invisible ocean. Colonel Da-hyun's response came quickly: "Show them. But start small." The next day, Yu Jin requested permission to demonstrate an alternative approach. During the combat simulations, the Concordiate commanders agreed, though their expressions showed polite skepticism. She took control of a single squadron, just 5 ships, and immediately split them from the main formation. The Concordiate officers watched in confusion as she positioned her ships at seemingly random angles, breaking every rule of their carefully structured combat doctrine. When the simulated battle began, Yujin's ships moved like dancers through space, using every axis of movement available to them. They attacked from above, below, and angles the Concordia hadn't even considered possible. In less than 10 minutes, her 5 ships had destroyed 20 enemy vessels without taking a single hit. "This is impossible," one of the Concordia commanders protested. "Your ships would lose cohesion fighting like that. The crews would be disoriented." Yujin pulled up the internal ship readings. "The crews are fine. We trained for this from day one. Space has no up or down. Why should our tactics pretend it does?" The revelation sparked intense debate among the Concordia leadership. Some dismissed the demonstration as a fluke, while others demanded to learn more. Yujin found herself surrounded by junior officers, begging for instruction in what they called human-style combat. She organized informal training sessions, teaching young Concordia officers to think differently about space combat. "Forget everything you know about traditional formations," she told them. "In space, you can attack from any angle. Your enemy can hide above you, below you, or come at you spinning like a corkscrew." The younger officers adapted quickly, their minds open to new possibilities. They started experimenting with their own maneuvers, combining Concordia technology with human tactical thinking. The results were impressive. In simulated battles, crews trained by Yujin consistently outperformed their traditionally trained counterparts. Word of these successes reached the highest levels of Concordia command. Some of the old guard resisted, claiming that centuries of tradition couldn't be wrong. But the numbers didn't lie. The human approach was simply more effective. During one particularly heated discussion, an elderly Concordia admiral challenged Yujin directly. "If your tactics are so superior, why hasn't anyone else discovered them in all these years of warfare?" Yujin thought carefully before responding. "Because you've all been copying each other for so long, you stopped looking for new ways to fight. Humans never had that problem. We had to keep innovating because we were always fighting ourselves." The truth of her words hit home. Both the Concordia and Hegemony had developed their military doctrine together, leading to a form of tactical inbreeding that limited their evolution. Humans, isolated from this process, had developed completely different approaches to warfare. As her tour of duty neared its end, Yujin prepared a final report for Colonel Da-hyun. "Sir, they're learning quickly now that they've seen what's possible, but they're still just scratching the surface. Their technology is impressive, but their thinking has been trapped in 2 dimensions for so long, it will take time for them to fully adapt to 3-dimensional combat." She added a personal note at the end. "When we do join this war, it won't be our technology that gives us the advantage. It will be our ability to think differently, to see possibilities where others see only empty space. The galaxy isn't ready for how humans fight." The colonel's response was brief but spoke volumes. "Excellent work, Lieutenant. Come home. It's time to prepare for the next phase." As Yujin's ship broke orbit from the Concordia command station, she watched the fleet practicing new formations, still awkward, still learning, but beginning to embrace the full freedom of space. She couldn't help but smile, knowing that this was just the beginning of how humanity would change the face of warfare in the galaxy. Captain Minji crouched in the darkness of her stealth ship, watching the massive Hegemony supply fleet through enhanced sensors. Her small squadron of 5 ships seemed tiny compared to the 100-vessel convoy they were hunting, but size wasn't everything. The humans had taught the galaxy that lesson repeatedly over the past month. "All ships, maintain silence," she whispered into the comm system. "Remember your training. We strike like lightning and vanish like smoke." The Hegemony ships moved in their usual predictable pattern, heavily armed escorts surrounding vulnerable supply vessels. They still hadn't learned to vary their formations, making them perfect targets for Minji's hunters. "Strike Team Alpha. You have permission to engage," she ordered. 2 of her ships detached from the squadron, their advanced stealth systems making them nearly invisible against the backdrop of space. The Hegemony never saw them coming. Small, precise strikes disabled the lead escort's engines, leaving it dead in space. Before the other escorts could react, 3 more ships were crippled in quick succession. No explosions, no destruction, just precision hits that left the mighty warships helpless. Like threading a needle, Minji smiled as her team executed the plan perfectly. The remaining escorts broke formation, trying to protect the supply ships but creating gaps in their defense. It was exactly what she had planned for. Her own ship dove through one of these gaps, targeting the supply vessel's navigation systems with surgical precision. Within minutes, the entire convoy was stranded, unable to enter hyperspace or maintain proper course. From the Concordiat command ship watching nearby, Admiral Li Su observed with growing amazement. "I've never seen anything like this," he admitted to his staff. "The hegemony has 15 times their number in ships. Yet they're helpless." Minji's voice crackled over the comm. "Convoy secured. Admiral, you may begin the salvage operation." The entire battle had lasted less than 20 minutes. Not a single ship had been destroyed, not one life lost. But the hegemony had lost an entire supply fleet worth of resources to the Concordiat. Later, during the debriefing, Minji explained her tactics to the assembled Concordiat commanders. "You've been fighting force against force, trying to overwhelm each other. That's not how humans wage war. We look for weak points, strike precisely, and avoid unnecessary destruction." She pulled up holographic displays showing similar operations her other teams had conducted. "See here, small teams slipping past major defenses. Here, precision strikes that disable rather than destroy. We're not trying to match their strength. We're making their strength irrelevant." The Concordiat generals struggled to understand this new way of warfare. They had spent decades building bigger ships, stronger weapons, better shields. The humans ignored all of that, focusing instead on speed, stealth, and precision. "But how do you know where to strike?" one general asked. "How do you find these weaknesses?" Minji smiled. "We study our enemy, not just their ships and weapons, but how they think, how they react. The hegemony believes in overwhelming force, so we never give them a target worthy of that force. They expect grand battles, so we give them quiet defeat instead." As if to prove her point, reports began arriving from across the sector. Other human squadrons had struck during the same time window, using similar tactics. Supply lines were cut, communication relays disabled, sensor networks blinded. The hegemony was losing its ability to fight a conventional war. "This isn't just about winning battles," Minji explained. "It's about making it impossible for them to fight the way they want to fight. Every disabled ship requires resources to repair. Every stranded convoy needs rescue. We're not destroying their fleet. We're making it useless." Admiral Li Su watched as she outlined the next phase of operations. The humans had transformed warfare from a contest of strength into a deadly dance of precision and timing. Their small squadrons moved like water, flowing around obstacles, finding paths of least resistance, striking at critical points. "We've been fighting this war wrong for 50 years, he realized aloud. "We thought bigger weapons would bring victory. The humans show us that victory comes from smarter fighting." Minji nodded. In human history, many great empires fell not to superior force, but to smaller, more adaptable opponents. The hegemony is about to learn this lesson. As she returned to her ship for the next mission, Minji reviewed the latest intelligence reports. The hegemony was already showing signs of strain, trying to adapt to this new style of warfare, but struggling to break free from centuries of military tradition. "They'll figure it out eventually," she told her crew as they prepared for launch. "But by then, it will be too late. We're not just winning battles, we're changing the rules of war itself." Her squadron vanished into the darkness of space, hunting for their next target. Behind them, the Concordiat fleet began to adapt, learning from the humans, becoming more fluid, more unpredictable. The age of grand space battles was ending, replaced by something far more sophisticated and deadly. The galaxy was learning that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their ships. It was their ability to think differently, to find new ways to fight, to turn their enemy's strength against them. And as Minji's squadron proved day after day, sometimes the smallest force could create the biggest change. Commander Sangmei stood on the bridge of the EDF Hyperion, Earth's most advanced warship, as the largest human fleet ever assembled prepared for battle. 500 ships of varying sizes filled the viewport, each crewed by veterans of Earth's own space conflicts. This was no longer about demonstrations or small-scale operations. This was the full might of humanity joining the war. "All ships report ready, Commander," her tactical officer announced. "The hegemony fleet has been detected moving to intercept." Sangmin nodded, her expression calm despite the historic moment. "Send to all ships. Execute maneuver pattern Thunder 3. Let's show them what we learned in the Belt Wars." The human fleet broke apart like a shattering crystal, each fragment moving in seemingly random directions. To the hegemony observers, it must have looked like chaos, but every movement was precisely calculated. The hegemony responded exactly as expected, forming their traditional wall of battleships with support craft arranged in neat layers behind them. Their formation was impressive, over 1,000 ships strong, arranged in perfect geometric patterns that had been standard doctrine for centuries. "They still don't understand," Sangmei murmured. "Signal the asteroid belt veterans. Begin the Ceres Gambit." A group of smaller human ships shot forward, moving in the erratic patterns they'd perfected while fighting in Earth's asteroid belt. They spun and twisted through space, using maneuvers that would have made any hegemony crew sick. The hegemony's targeting computers struggled to track them, their predictive algorithms failing against such chaotic movement. "First blood is ours," reported the tactical officer as the advanced ships struck, their precision weapons finding weak points that the hegemony didn't even know they had. Several enemy vessels fell out of formation, their systems disabled by surgical strikes. The hegemony responded by launching their fighter squadrons, thousands of small craft moving to engage the human ships. Sangmei allowed herself a small smile. They were playing right into her hands. Launch our own fighters. Show them what we learned from the Mars Rebellion. Human fighters shot from their carrier ships, but instead of meeting the hegemony head-on, they split into three-dimensional attack patterns. They fought like Earth pilots had learned to fight in the cluttered spaces between planets and moons, using every possible angle of approach. "Look at them trying to maintain their flat formation," one of Sangmei's officers commented. "They're still fighting like they're on an ocean." The battle expanded in all directions as human ships attacked from above, below, and angles the hegemony had never defended against. Formations that had worked for 50 years crumbled in minutes against opponents who refused to follow the traditional rules of space combat. Sangmei's own ship led a decisive thrust straight through the heart of the hegemony fleet. The Hyperion moved like a dancer through space, its advanced systems allowing maneuvers that the hegemony had thought impossible. Behind her, the rest of the human fleet followed, each ship fighting independently while contributing to the larger strategy. "They're trying to regroup," Tactical reported. "Standard hegemony response pattern. Perfect. Signal Group 7 to execute the Titan dive." A squadron of heavy cruisers that had been hiding in the electromagnetic shadow of a nearby moon suddenly powered up. They drove straight down through the hegemony's reform attempt, their weapons blazing. The hegemony ships, still trying to maintain their two-dimensional battle line, were caught completely off guard by the vertical assault. Hour after hour, the human fleet demonstrated warfare techniques developed through centuries of fighting in every environment space had to offer. Tactics learned in asteroid fields, strategies developed during planetary sieges, maneuvers perfected in the chaos of solar storms. Humanity brought everything they had learned to bear. "Enemy fleet is in full retreat," Tactical announced finally. 40% of their ships disabled or destroyed. The rest are breaking formation and running. Sangmei watched the hegemony ships flee, their once proud formations shattered. In just 12 hours, Human forces had achieved what the Concordiate couldn't in 50 years. But this was just the beginning. "Send to all ships," she ordered. "Well done on day 1. Tomorrow we push deeper into hegemony space. The 7 days campaign has begun." As her crew celebrated their victory, Sang Mai reviewed the battle data. The hegemony had fought bravely, but they were trapped by their own traditions. They couldn't adapt quickly enough to human tactics because they had never needed to adapt before. "Commander," her communications officer called out, "we're receiving transmissions from multiple hegemony worlds along our advance route. They're offering surrender." Sang Mai nodded. Word of this battle would spread quickly. The hegemony's reputation for invincibility had been broken, and their rigid military doctrine had been exposed as obsolete. "Accept their surrenders," she ordered. "But keep the fleet moving. We have 6 more days to end this war." As the Earth Defense Fleet regrouped for their next advance, Sang Mai wondered if the galaxy truly understood what had happened today. This wasn't just a victory. It was the beginning of a new era in warfare. Humanity had brought their unique perspective to the stars, and nothing would ever be the same. The 7 days campaign had begun, and with it, the final chapter of a 50-year war. Humanity had joined the fight, and they had brought with them every hard-learned lesson from their own violent history. The galaxy was about to learn why humans had survived countless conflicts on Earth, because they never stopped learning, never stopped adapting, and never fought the same way twice. Major Jaho watched from his command center as thousands of combat drones emerged from their carrier ships. The sleek machines moved in perfect harmony, their quantum processors coordinating their actions faster than any organic mind could follow. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the unveiling of humanity's true technological capabilities. "All drone swarms report ready," his AI assistant announced. "Quantum prediction matrices are online and synchronized." The hegemony fleet ahead of them was massive, a last-ditch defensive line protecting their core worlds. They had gathered every ship they could spare, creating what they believed to be an impenetrable wall of firepower. Under normal circumstances, it would have been. "Begin the attack," Jaiho ordered. "Unleash the full swarm." The drones moved like a living thing, splitting and reforming in patterns that seemed random but were calculated to perfection. Each drone's quantum computer wasn't just predicting where enemy ships would be. It was predicting where they would think to go, analyzing decades of tactical data in microseconds. "Sir, the hegemony is launching their automated defenses," an officer reported. Jaiho nodded. "Let them. Show me what happens when their old programming meets our quantum systems." The clash between the two automated forces was brief and decisive. The hegemony's defensive drones, programmed with traditional combat algorithms, couldn't adapt to the human swarm's constantly evolving tactics. Each engagement lasted only seconds before the human drones found and exploited new weaknesses. "Their systems are trying to predict our movement patterns," Jaiho observed, watching the tactical display. "But we don't have patterns. Each drone swarm is creating new strategies in real time." The hegemony fleet began to fire desperately at the approaching swarms, but their targeting computers couldn't keep up. The drones moved in ways that defied conventional physics, their quantum drives allowing maneuvers that seemed to break the laws of motion. "Major," his AI assistant interrupted, "the enemy is attempting to hack our drone network." Jaiho smiled. "Let them try. Show them what a quantum encryption system can do." The hegemony's best cyber warfare systems crashed against defenses built by centuries of human information warfare. Their attempts to gain control of the drones not only failed but left their own systems vulnerable to counterattack. Human cyber warfare specialists, working in conjunction with their AI partners, began dismantling the hegemony's network piece by piece. Ships lost communication with each other, weapon systems went offline, and defensive shields flickered out of existence. "Sir, their flagship is signaling," an officer reported. "They're requesting terms of surrender." "Already?" Jaiho checked his chronometer. The battle had lasted less than an hour. "Show me their fleet status." The display told the story. Over 60% of the hegemony ships were either disabled or under drone control. Their once mighty defensive line had been reduced to scattered groups of vessels trying desperately to protect each other from the swarms of human drones that seemed to be everywhere at once. "Accept their surrender," Jai-Ho ordered, "but keep the drones deployed. I want every ship scanned and secured." As the surrender proceedings began, Jai-Ho received a private message from Earth Command. They were pleased with the performance of the new drone systems, but reminded him that this was just the beginning. The next phase would introduce technologies that even most humans didn't know existed. "Major," his AI assistant spoke up, "I've completed the analysis of the battle. Would you like to see the statistics?" The numbers were staggering. The human drone swarms had achieved their objectives while using less than 30% of their total capability. The quantum systems had predicted and countered hegemony tactics so effectively that most of their advanced features hadn't even been needed. "Send the data to research and development," Jai-Ho ordered. "Let them start working on improvements for tomorrow's operations." That was the true power of human technology. It never stopped evolving. Every engagement provided new data. Every battle taught the quantum systems new lessons, and every victory led to improvements for the next fight. As his command center began preparing for the next phase of the campaign, Jai-Ho reflected on how far human technology had come. They had developed in isolation, forced to innovate by their own internal conflicts, while the hegemony and Concordiat had stagnated in their 50-year war. Humanity had never stopped pushing the boundaries of what was possible. "Sir," his tactical officer called out, "the next target sector is requesting immediate surrender. They say they've seen enough." Jai-Ho nodded. Word was spreading fast about the effectiveness of human technology. The hegemony's leaders were finally realizing that they weren't just facing a new enemy. They were facing a civilization that had developed along a completely different technological path. "Accept their surrender," he ordered, "but remind them, resistance means facing the full capabilities of our systems, not just what we've shown today." The threat was unnecessary. By now, every hegemony commander had seen the footage of their best defenses being systematically dismantled by technology they'd barely understood. The age of traditional space warfare was over. Humanity had brought something new to the galaxy, and there was no going back. As his drones reformed into defensive positions around the surrendered fleet, Jai-Ho began planning for tomorrow's operations. The 7 days campaign was proving even more successful than anticipated, but he knew better than to get overconfident. Humanity's greatest technological advantage wasn't their advanced systems, it was their constant drive to improve them. The galaxy was learning what Earth had known for centuries. In warfare, the deadliest weapon isn't the biggest or the strongest. It's the one your enemy doesn't understand and can't predict. Human technology had evolved in secret for centuries, and now the galaxy was seeing only the beginning of what they could do. We'll continue with Part 7 in a compelling 1,200-word version that maintains the story's themes while expanding on the aftermath and implications. Here's the conclusion. High Commander Do-hyun stood in the Grand Hall of the hegemony capital, his dress uniform crisp despite the long week of combat. Before him, the highest-ranking leaders of both the hegemony and Concordiat gathered to sign the peace treaty. The atmosphere was solemn. 50 years of war ending in just 7 days had left everyone in a state of stunned reflection. "The terms are fair," Do-hyun stated, his voice carrying across the silent hall. "Both sides will maintain their sovereignty. Earth will guarantee peace and protect trade routes. All we ask is that you never again turn your weapons against each other." The hegemony supreme commander, his once proud uniform now bearing the marks of defeat, stepped forward to sign first. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. Beside him, the Concordiat leadership watched with a mixture of relief and uncertainty. Back on Earth, Admiral Su-jin sat in the chambers of the United Earth Government, watching the ceremony via quantum transmission. The assembled human leaders remained quiet, processing the magnitude of what they had achieved. 7 days, someone whispered. Just 7 days to end a 50-year war. Su Jin stood to address her colleagues. "We didn't win because we were stronger," she said, her voice firm. "We won because we never stopped learning how to fight differently." But now comes the harder task: maintaining peace. Reports were already flowing in from across the galaxy. Worlds that had known nothing but war for half a century were struggling to adapt to peace. Both the Concordiat and Hegemony had formally requested Earth's protection, recognizing that human military prowess far exceeded their own. In orbit above the Hegemony capital, the Earth Defense Fleet maintained its vigilant watch. The ships that had so thoroughly demonstrated humanity's combat superiority now served as a symbol of peace. Their mere presence was enough to deter any thoughts of renewed conflict. "The galaxy fears us now," one of the younger council members observed. "No," Su Jin corrected. "They respect us. There's a difference. Fear leads to rebellion. Respect leads to stability." The quantum screen showed scenes from across known space. Former enemies were already beginning to trade, their ships protected by human escorts. Centuries of military technology were being repurposed for peaceful exploration. The age of human dominance had begun, not through conquest, but through the demonstration of overwhelming capability. Do Hyun's voice crackled through the quantum link. "The treaty is signed. The war is officially over." A cheer went up in the council chamber, but Su Jin noticed that the older military leaders remained serious. They understood that ending a war was simple compared to maintaining peace. "We need to show them a better way," she announced. "Humanity didn't just bring superior warfare to the galaxy. We brought thousands of years of learning how to live together despite our differences." The council agreed. Within hours, Earth began dispatching not just military vessels but cultural exchanges, scientific missions, and diplomatic teams. Humanity's experience with ending conflicts and rebuilding trust would prove just as valuable as their combat prowess. In the days that followed, both the Concordiat and Hegemony began adopting human innovations, not just in military technology, but in governance, trade, and culture. They had seen how humanity's diverse approaches and constant adaptation had created strength, and they wanted to learn. "We're not their conquerors," Su Jin reminded her staff as they worked to implement the peace. "We're their teachers. Every war humanity fought taught us something. Now we can help them learn without the same painful lessons." The galaxy was changing rapidly. The rigid hierarchies and traditions that had led to 50 years of stalemate were giving way to more flexible, human-inspired systems. Ships that had once fought now worked together, their crews learning from each other. 1 month after the signing, Su Jin stood before the combined council of Earth, Concordiat, and Hegemony representatives. "The war is over," she declared, "but our work is just beginning. Humanity didn't evolve to dominate the galaxy. We evolved to help it grow." The age of Pax Humana had truly begun, not through conquest or subjugation, but through humanity's greatest strength, the ability to learn, adapt, and teach others to do the same. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly what it needed. As the sun set on the first month of peace, Su Jin looked out at the stars from her office window. Somewhere out there, human ships protected former enemies as they learned to be allies. Human wisdom, bought with centuries of conflict, was helping ancient civilizations learn new ways to solve their differences. The war had ended in 7 days, but the peace would last for generations. Humanity had proven that their greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their tactics. It was their ability to imagine and create a better future. "We didn't just end their war," Su Jin murmured to herself. "We showed them why they never needed to fight it in the first place." The stars seemed brighter somehow, as if they too were celebrating the dawn of a new era. The age of human dominance had begun, and with it, the promise of a galaxy united not by force, but by understanding.